Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Pew Political Podcast. I'm Eshan Pokhrel. I'm just coming to you guys here Saturday, April 20th, to cover four big national security bills that the House of Representatives passed. These bills were all the subject of very, very intense debate and opposition across the political spectrum, both the far left and the far right, having different opposition against them, but again, they have now passed, and we just want to break down what's in the bills and what they mean for both the United States here at home, but also abroad. So the first bill we're going to look at was H.R. 8036, the Indo-Pacific Security Supplemental Appropriations Act of 2024. So sponsored by Representative Tom Cole of Oklahoma, and all it does really is just provide funding to the Indo-Pacific region of the world, primarily Taiwan and countries around there, so Japan, the Philippines, countries that are allied with the United States in a bid to combat the growing influence of China in the region and across the world. So this bill, as summarized by Congress.gov, provides funding to the DoD and the State Department to provide replacements or reimbursements for defense items and services that the Department of Defense has provided to Taiwan, improving submarine industry, increasing funding to priorities of the U.S. Indo-Pacific Command, and as well as other financing activities. So this was a pretty popular bill across the aisle, actually the least contentious of the funding bills. This one passed 385 yay votes, 34 nay votes, and one voting present. That one was Representative Rashida Tlaib of Michigan, the Democrat from Michigan. She voted present on this vote. And this vote actually provides $8.12 billion to allies in the region, and is actually the smallest part of this four-part package that was passed this morning in the House. Taiwan has been a pressing concern of mostly conservatives who have tried to pivot the foreign aid conversation from Ukraine to a place like Taiwan, who has obviously the huge presence of mainland China bearing down on it geographically, and obviously with Taiwanese importance in the semiconductor manufacturing across the world. It is definitely seen as a very big priority for American foreign policy. So this spending was passed pretty easily, and it looks poised to pass the Senate fairly soon. Next, we have H.R. 8034, the Israel Security Supplemental Appropriations Act of 2024. This is also a much more contentious vote than Taiwan, mainly because of the scope of the Israeli response to the October 7th attacks by Hamas. So Israel's definitely been a divisive subject among both progressive Democrats, who have called the actions of the Israeli military a genocide. Also, at the same time, from the far right, a lot of more conservative budget hawks calling for an end to foreign aid. The Israeli question is a little interesting. There's a conversation working its way throughout the political world, slowly but inevitably coming up soon, called the Leahy Law, named after former Senator Leahy of Vermont, who just retired, I believe, so last session. So this is actually kind of interesting because if Israel is found to be committing human rights violations, I think specifically gross violations of human rights is the term used by the Leahy Law, then no foreign aid to Israel, weapons, humanitarian, anything can be provided. And that will be very fascinating, as Israel is obviously the Americans' our biggest ally in the Middle East, has been that way for decades. But at the same time, there's definitely been an effort to quell the potential of the Leahy Law coming into effect with Israel, and that's why this budget vote was so watched coming up. Not just to see if it would pass, which I think everybody was expecting a passage, but to see who would oppose it and how many people exactly. So we have the final vote count. Israeli funding passes with a 366 to 58 vote. 366 yeas, 58 nays. Notably, 21 Republicans vote against and 37 Democrats. And of the Democrats, some big names: Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the Congresswoman from New York; Maxwell Alejandro Frost, the only Gen Z member of Congress and Congressman from Florida; other members of the squad: Ayanna Pressley, Bonnie Watson-Coleman, Rashida Tlaib, who actually is Palestinian, Ilhan Omar, Pramila Jayapal, Ro Khanna, Summer Lee, people such as that who have voted against this bill. At the same time, you have Republicans such as Andy Biggs, Lauren Boebert, Eli Crane, Paul Gosar, Bob Good of Virginia, Thomas Massie of Kentucky, Matt Rosendale of Montana, a lot of people, and Chip Roy of Texas, members of the Freedom Caucus or Freedom Caucus adjacent, so the more conservative budget hawk, conservative-leaning members of the Republican Party who voted against funding to Israel. And while a lot of these members have released statements expressing a support for Israel, the question, especially with people like Bob Good of Virginia, he released a statement saying that while he supports Israel fully, he wants to have a package that pays for itself. And currently the Israeli package is valued at $26.38 billion to Israel to continue its campaign in the Gaza Strip against Hamas. At the same time, with Israel, it's pretty fascinating because the Biden administration has sort of circumvented the traditional workings of aid and weapons sales and has been selling arms directly to Israel using presidential authority, which has been expanded post World War II and especially since 9/11 to be able to do that. And Congress, this is actually the first spending package to Israel Congress has passed since I believe November, when they passed a $14 billion aid to Israel. At least the House did, as far as I'm aware. So, yeah, Israel gets their funding. No present votes here, but again, both members of the Freedom Caucus on the right and the progressive wing of the Democratic Party on the left joining forces for no votes on this one. And finally, we probably have the biggest question, the most closely watched at least, and the biggest package in terms of spending, H.R. 8035, the Ukraine Security Supplemental Appropriations Act. So Ukraine hasn't actually received U.S. aid in over a year now. The House nothing's passed both houses in over 480 days, I believe, in terms of Ukraine aid, that is. So this one was closely watched. There was a lot of commotion on the House side of things, not just about where the aid was going or how much, but also about the politics around it, with a very slim majority. Republicans currently have a 217 to 213 majority, so a 4-seat majority. 5 seats are vacant, but with a lot of resignations, a lot of members leaving Congress, including former Speaker Kevin McCarthy, and actually just today, influential Congressman Mike Gallagher, and many others leaving Congress, Republicans have a very, very slim majority to work with. That created a situation where essentially any aid to Ukraine would be passed with the help of Democrats, which is a blow to Speaker Mike Johnson, who was elected as a more conservative speaker. And in fact, Speaker Mike Johnson has been a more conservative member of Congress. He actually had never voted for Ukraine aid or even promoted it until his ascension to the speakership. So his sudden, you could say, promotion of Ukraine aid was seen as a betrayal by a lot of Republicans and a lot of Freedom Caucus members. So much so that Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene of Georgia announced her intention to file a motion to vacate the Speaker's chair. If you remember from about a year ago, Congressman Matt Gaetz of Florida did the same thing to Kevin McCarthy, and that led to a whole 3-week process of trying to find a new speaker, something that hadn't been done in hundreds of years in that fashion, and it took 3 weeks to complete. And we were stuck with, I guess you could say, Mike Johnson, who had not really assumed leadership until the Speaker's chair. So after Ms. Greene's statements today on the floor, she called the Ukraine supplemental a shame on the American government, and also said that, quote unquote, peace is the last thing Washington wants because it does not fit the business model. So very strong words from Ms. Green on the Ukraine supplemental, and that was when she was proposing her amendment to cut the funding in the bill to $0. So a show amendment, you could say. It did not pass. But a second Republican joined her, and this is Thomas Massie of Kentucky. Thomas Massie is a much more, you could say, much less controversial figure, I guess, than Marjorie Taylor Greene. Mr. Massie is a libertarian leading member of Congress. As far as I'm aware, he has never actually voted for a foreign aid package in his life and his tenure in Congress. So Mr. Massie's objections are just above on foreign aid spending in the context of no bill was sent in that would address the U.S. border, which has been a key concern for conservatives over the last couple of months and even years, and is a huge central tenet to their electoral strategy. So Mr. Massie joined in. Then we had Paul Gosar, Republican from Arizona, yesterday also signing on to the motion to vacate. And Marjorie Taylor Greene has stated that other members are also interested in it but have not signed their names. And as of right now, there is no intention to file a motion to vacate and officially start the process on the House floor. From what we understand, I believe Jake Sherman of Punchbowl News reported that Thomas Massie actually told Mike Johnson to resign so they could pick a new speaker in conference prior to having a whole show on the House floor. But that didn't happen, and now we are here. So, Ukraine aid, final vote tally on the $60.84 billion package to the Eastern European nation to continue its war effort against Russia, which has went fairly poorly for the Ukrainians. It's a pretty well known, pretty widely accepted fact, you would say. There's been talks about how peace agreements have been shut down by the British and the Americans, which no one wants to see. Obviously, no one wants to see more lives being lost, but it seems that the American hope is for them to continue the war, even though territorially Russia will be more likely to be able to continue their efforts in doing whatever they want, whatever their end goal truly is with Ukraine. So this vote came up, last vote of the day, 311 yay votes, 112 no votes, and 1 voting present. The present vote was Representative Dan Muser of Pennsylvania, Republican of Pennsylvania. And yeah, very notably, most notably probably, maybe most damning for Speaker Mike Johnson, is that 101 Republicans voted yes on this bill, but 112 of them voted against it. So the Ukraine package actually did not clear a majority of the majority party, while all 210 Democrats in the chamber voted yes. So this was definitely not a win for Mike Johnson. It clearly shows that the Ukraine aid was not popular within his caucus, and you can even see that Ukraine aid is a divisive figure across the nation. Since this new Gallup poll, relatively new, I guess last week, April, Gallup says more Americans say U.S. is not helping Ukraine enough, but at the same time, the number that believe that Ukraine is doing, or we are not doing enough, is at 36%, while people that say we are doing too much is at 36%. There's a lot of variability. I think a lot of people have just lost interest in the issue, as horrible as that sounds. It's ridiculous to expect that people are going to be tuned into international conflicts thousands of miles away so intensely for over a span of years. At the beginning, it's obviously there's much stronger emotions at the beginning. But this is definitely a flip from what it was in October 2023. 41% of Americans thought that we were doing too much to help Ukraine, while 25% said not enough. But this number has rebounded to 36%. So they're split at 36%. At the same time, Republicans have begun to turn away from Ukraine funding on various different grounds. Ukraine obviously has been urged to continue their war effort by Americans and British members of government, according to reports from within former members of Parliament and former members of Congress and current members of Congress to that too, and news personalities. But yeah, this passed the House. It was very odd. House Democrats, after the passage, were seen waving Ukrainian flags in the House chamber. Members of the Republican caucus objected to that. They thought that was very poor taste, and I would have to agree. It's very odd to be waving the flags of non-American countries in the United States House of Representatives chamber. As for any big no votes, again, on the Republican side, there wasn't any notable. You could say a lot of the Freedom Caucus members and a lot of more conservative members of the caucus voted no. Just looking at the list right now, it's a lot of people that you would expect. Some notable names, I guess Byron Donalds of Florida, rising star on the Republican side, voted no. Matt Gaetz, no. Michelle Fischbach of Minnesota, a fairly influential congresswoman, I believe she's on appropriations, voted no. Marjorie Taylor Greene, obviously a no. Jim Jordan, a no. Nancy Mace, a no. Matt Rosendale, a no. Victoria Spartz, who actually is Ukrainian, a no. Or former Ukrainian citizen, I believe. Jeff Van Drew, no. Of New Jersey. Dale Strong, no. Of Alabama. So, a lot of variation on who voted no on this one. Whether they were a Freedom Caucus member, whether they're just a spending hawk. Then obviously Thomas Massey, no as well. At the same time, this bill is definitely going to cause a rift in the Republican caucus due to the implication that Mike Johnson needs Democrats to stay in power. So with the motion to vacate possibly coming up, politically this could be a disaster for Republicans, because considering there's an election in less than 7 months now, presidential, congressional, Senate, it seems unlikely that the Republicans will keep the House, although many things could change. And they also have it, at the same time, they do have a good chance at retaking the Senate just because of the way the seats are up this year. So, but the problem is for Republicans, infighting like another motion to vacate, where if you have a drawn-out speakership battle, imagine 3 more weeks. Imagine having a 3-week battle for who's the Speaker of the House going into or coming out of the summer, where people are starting to actually pay attention to what's going on in D.C. as the presidential election's coming up. It will not look good for Republicans. And I think the members like Thomas Massey, who said that he would not bring it to the floor, the motion to vacate, but he'd rather solve it in-house, are starting to realize that and starting to think ahead to 2024 itself. But this puts Mike Johnson in a very bad position, because now it's clear that he's going to have to rely on Democrats to bail him out, because on any singular vote, if it's a party line vote, he can only lose 2 Republicans on any vote. Only 2 Republicans can flip on any vote to kill a bill or do anything. The majority is so slim. So this is a very poor situation for Mike Johnson to navigate. It would be a bad situation for any Speaker of the House to navigate, but considering Mike Johnson is a first-time Speaker who has no real leadership experience at a scale that is Speaker of the House, which is Speaker of the House is second in line to the President after the Vice President. So a very important position and a very tough situation for Mike Johnson going into November. So we just wanted to come on here and recap some big news coming out of the DC area. We're going to stay updated on this as we get into the election, into the meat and bones, I guess you could say, of 2024, because there's a lot of things coming up. The Democratic and Republican national conventions will be happening in the summer. Primaries are almost over, or they will be over by the summer. We'll have a true general election to look forward to, and we're going to continue to cover it as best we can over at PB Political. So thank you guys for listening to this. If you guys have any ideas for podcasts or any guests or suggestions or anything, feel free to contact us on Instagram, over email, on our website, anywhere you guys can think of. And yeah, thank you all for listening. Keep going to the website and the social medias. I'm Eshan Pokhrel, and goodbye.